Oh, hey, sorry, didn't see you there. You scared the shit out of me. I mean, 'tis the season, right? It just kind of sucks because I'm so easy to scare. Being scared is fun though. There's a ton of different options for being scared. Movies, books, commitment, there's a ton of options. But the best type of horror is the one you can play. It's such a rush of feeling the adrenaline and pissing myself.
Are you sure?
Horror games are a massive staple in the video game industry. I mean, it goes without saying, if there's a way to simultaneously scare the hell out of someone without having a costume or a lawsuit, then you bet your ass video games are next in line. Horror is very much a specific art form. Everyone scares differently, so the various types of horrors keep things fresh. Amanda! Now, not all of them can be winners. With a market so saturated with countless horror films and whatnot, there's gotta be some bad ones.
But how do you make horror bad? Isn't scaring like the easiest thing to do? Well, for every Friday the 13th, there's a Jason X. And the same can be said for video games. For every Outlast, there's an Outlast 2. And that's what we're gonna be looking at today. Horror games that just completely miss the mark.
Now, I want to start off with the biggest one that's been on my mind when this topic is brought up: Resident Evil. Now, to clarify, I'm not entirely talking about the recent installments. Those have more or less kept their horror tropes. See, I didn't grow up with these games like apparently everyone under the sun did. I came in very late to the series. I genuinely don't even remember what the first one I played was. And nowadays, I'd say RE has made its mark on the horror genre more than it did back in the day. Well, more or less. I'm sure when everyone was wearing diapers and playing this game, it was the scariest thing in the world. But looking at it now, I don't really see it. I mean, obviously I don't see it. I'm a grown man wearing diapers now. I don't know, I got confused when people kept calling it a horror game. I get it, there's zombies, but like, what else? Having zombies and buff men in thongs doesn't inherently make it scary and terrifying. Some would say it's the story that helps sell the fear, and I would agree with that. If the story helped sell the fear. You are a fucking liar if you sit there and try to convince me that the plots of these games aren't the goofiest thing in the world. Why are there zombies? Oh, it's a virus made by the corrupt government. Oh, okay, so why are we fighting a businessman with standards who turns into a big fish monster thing that we fight on a boat with miniguns? Because of, corrupt government? I think what really scared people with these old games was that the strict movement left them feeling helpless and made everything scary by default, which I really hate. Yes, I know, tank controls were very much the thing in this era and it's a staple of the series. Staple or not, I still hate it. I know, I'm not like the other mega ass clapper gamer chads who can master tank controls with the rock hard abs. I'm a peasant gamer virgin who needs to have movement when I aim my gun. Now, I'm not saying that these games are bad, but they are. These games are very much an acquired taste. Either you grew up with them or you hate moving your character. I personally don't see a big reason to come back to these, especially if you're seeking horror. This is why I appreciate the new age of RE games. The recent games have very much tapped into their horror roots. More unsettling, scary, in your face, all while also sometimes being a bit goofy with the plot. RE7 is still a fantastic game. It nails almost everything I need when I play a horror game, even if it got super batshit insane near the end. Then RE8 kind of threw it all out the window. Don't get me wrong, I really like Village, but goddamn, the whiplash I got from 7 to 8 was insane. We can get into that in a separate video. Now, with the old Resident Evil games, I can still appreciate them for what they did for the gaming industry. Doesn't mean I have to like them. But you know who I do like? The sponsor of today's video. Rogue Energy is designed to be the ultimate gaming energy drink. 0 sugar, 0 fillers, and only 5 whole calories. That's insane. Luckily for me, I can only count to 5. This is the #1 drink packed with essential vitamins and loaded with brain-enhancing nootropics. Yeah, that. at optimal levels. Going off script for a sec, I've made the switch to Rogue a while ago, and it's been worth the switch for me. I'm a heavy gym goer, and I need that extra kick without having that crash later on. Make the switch to a better tasting, better mixing, and more efficient gaming drink brand. Be sure to use code SHEMP at checkout for 10% off your entire order. Thank you, Rogue Energy. And now, back to the video. Now that we hurt Resident Evil's feelings, let's talk about its cooler little sister, Silent Hill. Everyone would argue that these games, which came out around the same time mind you, do everything better. The controls aren't as awful, the game taps more into the horror element, and the gameplay loop is a bit more intriguing. I would argue that these games were a bit more ambitious too. A few of them do the multiple endings, which give you another reason to experience the story again. Now, say what you want about the later entries, but you can't deny that they still hold on to the horror trope all the way. Regardless of what you think of how bad the controls are, it's still Silent Hill at its roots. The same can't really be said for Resident Evil, at least before RE7. These games tap into a different type of scary rather than, oh no, spooky zombies. Silent Hill relies heavily on psychological horror, which is my absolute favorite. It keeps the players thinking as the story unravels. It's more than just, where's my daughter?
Speaking of missing kids, any updates? No? I understand. Thank you. Anyways, horror isn't mainly just for adults. I mean, hell, Goosebumps has proven over the years that there can be scary things for kids without it being such a gory, M-rated mess.
The biggest example of this category would be Five Nights at Freddy's, a game literally everyone knows. So much so that it's more well known among the public than the Spanish flu of 1918. This series channels the embodiment of being stranded with nowhere to go. It's a very different type of scary game that works for what it is. It's a jump scare fest with strategy and a bunch of porn, I mean games. Like Resident Evil, you don't have to be a fan of these games to appreciate what they did for the industry. I actually like these games. The lore and whatnot is extremely goofy and dumb, but I'm fucking here for it. I'd argue it did the horror aspect pretty well. Until this one. You know, I respect them for trying something new, but like, hi, damn, dude. You're no longer fighting for your life in a small confined area. Instead, you could just run away. Yeah, being chased in horror games can be scary, but only when the game functions. It also doesn't help that the story is absolute nonsense, and not the good kind. I've constantly been mentioning how some of these stories are goofy and fun, but that's more tongue-in-cheek or so silly it's good. This is actual nonsense with no substance.
Freddy, you're supposed to be on lockdown.
I've done things that I'm not proud of, Vanessa.
After FNAF exploded onto the scene, it didn't take long for other horror games to follow in this genre. One of the OGs next to Five Nights at Nasty's was Hello Neighbor. I guess.
This isn't a horror game at all, but I felt obligated to mention it. It's just hide and seek with a broken AI as you try to unsolve the mystery of what's in the basement, I guess. It's very much in the kids horror game genre because it's big with kids, so I suppose it gets a pass, but that doesn't mean it hits the mark at all. One of the more well-known games next to FNAF is Bendy and the Ink Machine. This is a pretty good example of this specific genre. It's a really fun concept for a horror game. Steamboat Willie cartoons come to life and try to kill you. That's fun, I like that. This grabs the attention of all ages because of the concept alone, but that's really it, just the concept. The gameplay itself isn't super engaging. Another walking simulator with light puzzles and lore. There were countless times when I was recording the game where I just actually started falling asleep playing because I got so bored waiting for something to happen. Now, that could also be attributed to the fact that I'm playing the Switch port, which runs like ass and controls like ass, so I don't want to bash on the game because of that. I really like this game, but I kept falling asleep because of the constant running around and how I genuinely just didn't know where to go or what to do. The horror genre kind of revolves around that structure. I'd say that it's a bit more balanced with the newest game on the block, Poppy's Playtime. It's basically the same type of idea as Bendy, just with kids' toys instead of cartoons. It has its own interesting gameplay loop, what with the extending hands and evolving scenery, but it's still bogged down with the same type of aimless walking and waiting for the answers to the puzzles to show themselves, then getting scared. I don't really know much about the story, and I don't really care. This game has a whole slew of controversies that I'll let you dive into after this video. Now, all of those games even fit under the indie horror category, which we haven't even touched yet. There are so many amazing horror games made by smaller developers. Obviously, you have your main ones like Amnesia, the game that solely kicked off like in every YouTuber's career. It was such a different type of horror game, especially for a smaller team. We have a lot to credit Amnesia for in terms of making certain things common in these formats of games, like walking. I myself still haven't played it, so I can't speak much about how actually scary it is, but in the same vein, I have played Outlast, and it was pretty scary. I really liked the atmosphere of the game. It was so weird. Like, I was playing a reporter who snuck into Arkham, which is basically what the game is. It got really weird, but I think it played into it super well. Then we got the second one, and it was, yeah, very much a video game. Okay, it wasn't that bad. It was just so not the first game in relation to horror. Kind of like how Resident Evil 8 was to 7, except 8 was good. Now, to be fair, I haven't played this game since it released, and I don't really remember any of it besides a few bits and pieces, probably because it was so bad, but I'm willing to give it another shot, and I probably will over at twitch.tv/ShempOfficial, so maybe make sure you follow me so you can see what that's like. Okay, thanks, bye. I think the biggest indie horror surprise for me was Visage, or Visage, or however you pronounce the game. It was really damn good. It's still bogged down by the standard tropes of walking around until stuff happens, but at least this one keeps things fresh with the new scenery, set pieces, and this— oh god! Fucking damn it!
But those are just some rare instances of good indie horror games. Everyone wants to make a scary game because they're the easiest and the cheapest to make. So for every great game like Amnesia or Visage, you have 15 games like Daymare.
This game, oh my good fucking lord, I can't begin to explain how bad this is. Imagine taking the core gameplay of Resident Evil 4, right? And that's it. That's literally it. You don't do anything else with that. You have environments and stereotypical zombies with the main character that has the personality of a brick shithouse, combined with the most egregious gunplay and horrendous excuse for puzzles I've ever seen in a horror game that actually got a physical release. And not just a physical release, but an entire special edition with a cardboard box and merchandise inside. How the hell does this get produced? I understand funding it. Like I said, these games are cheap as f to make. I get it. But someone else had to agree to pay all of the fees to produce this game for multiple consoles and do a special edition for the booming Daymare fan base. So, yeah, this game sucks.
They must have had a lot of money to spare. Big budgets don't equal scary games.
Okay, let me clarify. I'm not saying that these are bad, but they definitely aren't as good or as scary as the team's earlier game, Until Dawn. The latter game was such a fun concept. Slasher/horror, cabin in the woods type story with a butterfly effect gameplay loop. You could argue that the choices in the game could lead to some really weird outcomes, but there's so many choices that it kind of balances out. You go through the game essentially directing a movie and making decisions at literally every stop. It's a fun ride and kept players guessing as they went back and played it more and more. After that, they went on to do the Dark Pictures Anthology, basically Until Dawn, but spread out across more games. It's the same exact concept, but with the option of multiplayer thrown in. Basically, you and a few friends can help determine where the story goes by controlling different aspects of it, which already makes the games way more fun. But the thing that they're missing is likable characters and substance. I'd argue that the plot of Until Dawn was super self-aware and rolled with it, whereas these plots feel a bit disjointed. Now, to give them credit, I haven't played all of the games. Home slice, that's a lot of hours. So I do plan on streaming these games as well, so I won't bash on them too much. I want to be fair after all. But I can tell these games are more of a passion project, which I respect. Hell, the team just released a new game that I'm still interested in checking out. Passion goes a long way, which leads me into my next game, The Evil Within. These games are... This game is really good. So this series was launched by the director of Resident Evil 4, which is super apparent by the style and design. I will give them props. It looks great. For a game that was released on the PS3 and PS4 generation, it still looks pretty good. I love the environments and set pieces, but that's really about it. Otherwise, the gameplay just feels kind of clunky, the story is super disconnected and all over the place, and nothing really feels like it has weight or effect to the horror. Look, I accidentally stumbled across a village of zombie guys, and I was thinking, oh shit, I better start running. So as I leisurely jog away, I look behind me, and they're still practicing social distancing. Which, good on you guys, you're infected, but still polite. I respect that. But it takes me out of the horror when I jog into a cutscene that has him running for his life. It made me feel like I was playing the game wrong. The second game really fixed almost all the problems I had with the first game. The biggest thing I appreciate is that it feels much more cinematic. I really appreciate and respect the new cinematography and set pieces, even though the voice acting is still pretty bad.
Where did you get this?
Everything else feels a bit more refined. It rolls with the outlandish nature of the plot and leans more into the batshit abilities and scares. I feel even more callbacks to the RE4 style, which feels really in place here. Mentioning all these really does highlight the various types of horror games. This game, for example, would be put into the action horror genre. I suppose other games like Dead Space and Fear would fit into that category as well. Games that still aim to scare the shit out of you, but give you the means to fight back. Then we have the walking simulator horror. Games like Visage and even Layers of Fear, where you mainly just walk around solving very light puzzles and enjoy the spooky ghost ride. After that is the really fucking boring horror game genre, like Layers of Fear 2. Holy good god damn, I was very much not prepared for how insanely boring the second game was. See, I never heard anything about it at all. I decided to stream my first playthrough for fun because I wanted some new genuine scares, and I remember asking multiple times if it was going to get scary, and it never did. I was extremely shocked by how hard they just fucked it up. Anyways, PT, you know it, you love it, and now you're sad, because we'll never see it fully realized. PT was the king of walking simulators for the longest time, so much so that everyone still tries to copy what it had going for it. PT, for those of you who don't know, ended up being a teaser for a Silent Hill reboot slash remake slash whatever, but swiftly got canceled and pulled by Konami. Ever since then, people have tried their damnedest to preserve it as much as possible or to emulate what they had going.
And there you have it, the weird and horrid world of horror games. There's so many to go through, so I'm just gonna keep some in my back pocket for next year. So until then,